Well, good evening. I'm Jude Kelly, the South Bank Centre's Artistic Director. On my right is Sarah Brown. She's a great advocate for girls' education. She's also chair of the Global Business Coalition for Education. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about your education, your educational background, which, well, it took me aback anyway.
Well, my very first school was halfway up Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, because my father had gone out there. He was working in educational publishing. My mother had gone out as the dutiful wife and promptly set up a nursery school in the back garden that was joint English and Kiswahili for as many kids as she could gather up, and I was just slightly too old to go to it. So I went off to the Arusha school down the road, and that was my first school. We then moved on when we went to move to Dar es Salaam, the capital, where I then went off to the international school. So you leap into an private American system that couldn't have been more different. And then when we came back to England, I just went through the state school system, through primary school system, and then through North London comprehensive system.
So when you were halfway up Kilimanjaro,
yeah.
Were you being taught in Swahili?
No, we were taught in English because it was the main language of the country, but as you operated and went round, I just remember people would move between different languages, just depending what they wanted to say. And also for a lot of the things you wanted to do, there weren't words in English for the things that you wanted to talk about. So I can sort of remember some things. I can name animals to this day and things like that, you know.
And what was the education system like? I mean, what was it based on? Was it based on an English education system?
Yeah, it was sort of try and get you behind a desk and do as much reading and writing as early as possible. And then when we moved to Dar es Salaam, it was suddenly swimming lessons followed by French lessons, you know, sort of, and a teacher that would slap you on the hand with a ruler if you were late to class. So it was just very different, yeah.
And meantime, your mother, when you were in the first school, was holding a field school.
My mother sort of invented her own school and had everyone doing arts and crafts and performance and learning in a much more dynamic way. And when we moved back to England, she brought that back with her and went through teacher training herself and went on to be a head teacher. And that was always her dynamic, was to shake things up a little bit and to really, really focus. I think she brought that back from Tanzania with her, that focus on children coming into a school where English is their second language and how you integrate when you operate, integrate everybody and have everybody learning and thriving in a school, when quite often they're going back to a home where they then flip into a different language entirely.
She did a PhD in education later on, didn't she?
Yeah, my mum's been a great enthusiast of lifelong learning and always swore she would get round to her PhD, but had various diversions along the way, including raising myself and my brothers. But she got her PhD when she was 72, a couple of years ago.
I think that's absolutely great. Mm-hmm. When you changed school, the different systems, mm-hmm. did they make you feel different in terms of being a girl or being a young woman?
I don't know. I think it's that thing of being other. I think if you're the person that comes in from outside, I think anyone that goes through a school system where you're moving school every 2 or 3 years, that sort of peripatetic lifestyle, you're the new person, so you're very quickly engaging. So I think that's less to do with being a girl and more to do with being the new person.
But they were mixed schools, were they?
I was always been at mixed schools until the very end. When I finally did my A-levels, I went to a school in North London called Camden School for Girls, having moved from a mixed comprehensive, and it was like an alien world to me. Everyone was suddenly talking about clothes a lot, and magazine, My Guy and Jackie, and I'd never heard of these things. I've got brothers. I was at a mixed comprehensive school, and this competitiveness, not just for learning in the classroom, but for what you were wearing or for social competitiveness.
Shoes, what shoes you were wearing.
It was just It took me a while to kind of even understand what that was.
When you went to university, did you know that you wanted to be a campaigning person? Because that's what you are, isn't it? You're a campaigning person.
Yeah, I don't think that I went to school, through school or into university thinking, off we go. I have to say it's probably appropriate in this week to say that I did join the Labour Party quite early on and got involved in a lot of door knocking and campaigning because of the political times that I lived in. And it just felt very important to go out there and be part of that. But I just felt I was joining into something else bigger that existed. At school, I had got in on all those sort of pupil, teacher, parent associations where you got to be quite noisy. So I think noise was my thing from an early age, was sort of speaking up for things. And at university, I just took advantage of all those lovely things you can do with the arts and got involved in contemporary arts festival and did things led by the subjects that I was interested in while I was doing a science degree. So it was not so much about the sort of the campaigning things. It was about immersing yourself in things. But I always felt, I mean, I grew up during that time where the big issues of the day were around racism and Nelson Mandela coming out of prison, were around the Anti-Nazi League and the Rock Against Racism events and those sort of things. So those were the big campaigning issues. And you didn't think about not being involved. If you're a North London girl, you just get stuck into all of that,
Isn't it interesting? I mean, in those days, people were, well, they weren't really cool unless they were doing those things, weren't they? I mean, it was
you could do it if you were uncool too. It wasn't a sort of, it was
what
much more sort of, there were things to protest, so you protested them.
Yes, there are still things to protest, but people seem to feel it's an unusual thing.
You see it, but it takes more, I think, before it builds up. But we also have different ways to protest now. You don't just have to hit the streets physically to make your presence felt. We've got that whole scope online where you can send your message out far and wide.
So do you think social networking and everything that the internet has given us, everything the World Wide Web has given us, has actually changed the noisiness? And is it still as noisy, but it's noisy somewhere else?
You can send your message much further and wider using the internet. So I still think there's a place for hitting the streets and doing something. And I think people do when there's a local issue, but it's I mean, I've been more engaged in international campaigns, so of course you reach out digitally rather than get your placard ready.
When you realised that you were professionally noisy, because personally you're quite quiet, which is a very good thing in a woman, I'm told. But the idea of making noise, of wanting to make change, you didn't actually apply it to education specifically, did you, for quite a long time?
No, not at all. It's one of those things I've grown up with, those values all through my life, through my parents, through my own education that I've had going through school, through university. But it's one of those things that along the way, as you hit issues that you care about, you realise it's education that delivers that change. So when you see people who are held back from having opportunity in their lives, it's education that would afford that. And I saw that through my teenage years in the UK, but I also have seen that through the global health movement that I've been so active in, particularly around the maternal health campaign. Those girls and women who are not thriving are the ones who are not getting educational opportunity. And when you look at the women that you really look up to, from Greta Michel and Aung San Suu Kyi to Dilma Rousseff to Julia Gillard, they have benefited because they've had a spectacular education. It's been their roadmap to getting to the top. So I don't think there's any way for anybody to either thrive through economic opportunity, through their own sort of personal self-fulfillment, or their own health and well-being and that of their family and community without having educational opportunity.
There's gathering energy around girls' education.
For sure.
And there's a gathering energy around violence against women, particularly in war zones. And why do you think that's happening? Is it the milk of human kindness drip feed happening finally, or is it something else that's making politicians and governments decide that they have to turn their attention to this? Why is it happening?
Just from my experience, you find that politicians and governments, particularly when it's about coalescing around an international community, tend to go through different themes. They don't seem to be able to do everything all at once. So you seem to get step changes. And if you have the opportunity to kind of go back and look through the 20th century at coming through women's emancipation, through women getting the vote, you've got the feminist movement of the 1970s and how that's developed since and what that is today. I think a lot of the last decades have been around emergency relief, around access to nutrition and water and sanitation, concern with the environment, and then you've had a big progress with global health. And I think what all of those sectors are finding is that you're banging up against areas you can't improve because education is now the thing that hasn't come forward. So everybody's got a reason now to make education an issue. And the other thing, separately and connectedly, is the issue around girls, is the fact that girls' development has lagged behind, again, is holding back development in communities, development for countries. Because I'd worked so closely with the maternal health campaign, worked very closely with the White Ribbon Alliance, the thing that I'm noticing more and more is as you're trying to create better outcomes for health and well-being for women, it's those women who are not in education, who get no chance at education or to stay a length of time, where you're not able to change their outcomes or affect change. So I took on the role at the Global Business Coalition for Education and took on the role as its chair because as another pull is wanting to engage the private sector and bringing that into education. But what you're looking for is better outcomes for people. And you're particularly looking for better outcomes for girls. And if you don't put the education piece into it, the other bits are just not going to maintain the progress that we've seen in recent years. And I really want to get involved in how all of these organisations, like Plan, like Girl Rising, are actually using their energies where collectively we really get that big movement out of it. And it's how we use all our separate energies to create something that actually heaves this forward.
Are there still things to change about girls' education in this country?
I know there's a big focus on STEM. I mean, there's a lot of change going on for education in this country. So it's, everyone's got their own perspective on that. I think we need a lot more recognition and support of the value of our cultural education through this country. I would say this talking to you, but I just think that all of us will benefit. And I also think that the way we treat women and the way we raise our girls is impacted a lot through the importance we put on that cultural education too. I think a lot of that richness comes through there. So that's the area I would want to champion a lot for girls across this country. And of course they should all grow up to be engineers and mathematicians and get involved in tech. And I know that there's that dynamic too, but I think we need both and we need more of it for girls. And that will benefit the opportunities that they have. I think it's got quite sophisticated outcomes when you invest at both ends. Yeah.
The final question I want to ask is about Malala, which is that her father said that she knew that she was under threat.
Yeah.
She knew that she might be attacked. She went ahead anyway as a pioneer, which is fantastic. I know that she's recovered and back at school and so on, and she's going to stay in this country. I don't know how long. Is she intending to actually see through not just the notion of being a figurehead, but being a practical campaigning person? Is she going to carry on doing that?
Well, I think they're faced with a lot of choices as a family and just need to take it steadily. It is extraordinary that she survived that attack. It's amazing that she's now got herself. So I think her education is a number one priority for her, and so it should be, and we should all be supporting that. And the two friends who were with her on the bus are, of course, still back in Pakistan. So there's that whole issue around their safety and their education that we sometimes forget that there were 3 of these little girls there. And so I think it's their education. And just if she gets all the way through school and gets herself to university, I think she'll be a role model for everybody always. But I know that they also are creating their own fund in her name, that she wants to carry on engaging in the bigger picture. And Zia Uddin, her father, has joined an advisory council, an advisor to Gordon, so that when they're having conversations, particularly with Pakistan, they're actually able to talk about what those big shifts are. That first of all, before you even work out where you're going to have teachers and classrooms and deliver an education where children are really learning, you've got to make sure that girls are safe to go to school and their teachers are safe. And we've seen a number of attacks since then, and that's the first thing they've got to go in. So I think they've got to go in right at the top with the full force of the international community behind them and use all those connections at the UN. And that's, Malala should be doing her homework while all that is happening and carry on being that symbol for us all.
Thank you, Sarah. That's really wonderful to hear all this work.